Hey, CityCast listeners, it's Megan. If you've been to the Strip, gosh, in the last 10 years, you know a lot has changed. And in a lot of ways, the anchor to all that is the Strip District Terminal. The historic 5-block building used to be the source for all the produce in Pittsburgh. And now it's an all-day destination for shopping, dining, working out, and more. There's the market on Saturdays, performances on Sundays, parking and retail discounts on Tuesdays. Check it all out for yourself in person and at stripdistrictterminal.com.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, the mayor's Twitter game has left some people wondering about what message he's sending. TSA has been finding a whole bunch of guns at the Pittsburgh airport. And a local sports hero is the newest face on the Wheaties box. It's July 14th, the Friday News Roundup. I'm Mallory Falk, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with CityCast producer Maria Carter. Good morning.
Hey there.
Yeah, and special guest, next Pittsburgh columnist Tony Norman.
Hey, good to be here again.
Good to have you here. Glad to have you back on the show. Tony, I know you are interested in talking a little bit about communication from the mayor's office.
Yeah, what piqued my interest was a scathing editorial in the Post-Gazette about a week ago about the mayor's communications office and the fact that the mayor has consolidated all communications under him and as a result has missed some pretty big opportunities to communicate the administration's and the city's perspective on important issues. And that is starting to look very partisan, very political, at a time, let's say, when the Bowers verdict, one of the biggest trials in Pittsburgh history had taken place. There was a verdict.
Yeah, and this is for the man who killed 11 worshipers at Tree of Life, Dorchdash, and New Light congregations back in 2018. He was found guilty.
Right. It took more than half the day, or at least half the day, for the mayor's office to comment on it. He was quicker to comment on Taylor Swift coming that weekend and declaring Pittsburgh Swissburg, and basically doing a whole slobbering over the fact that, the biggest pop star in the world was coming to Pittsburgh. Yeah, it is a big deal. But when you have such a monumental verdict, the fact that, a mass murderer, waiting for trial for years, we finally have a verdict, but we don't have a statement from the mayor's office that started PG and in fairness, and other folks saying, what is wrong with the values, the priorities of this administration when they don't have a prepared statement about the conviction, but there seemed to be some scrambling for the mayor's office to find its voice.
Yeah. And I mean, part of me is like, oh, I'm sure they pre-scheduled that Taylor Swift tweet. It's very likely that they did that. But as soon as that jury went in to deliberate, they probably should have canceled all their scheduled tweets and, been ready for that to happen. Because I was thinking if those two tweets were just switched, it all would have been okay.
Yeah, I remember kind of seeing them back to back and feeling like that was in a little bit of poor taste, and then kind of paying attention to the timestamps and realizing it was even worse than it first appeared.
This is an administration I think in general is a compassionate administration, but they're not particularly adept or fast on their feet when it comes to responding to the events of the day. And sometimes they seem a bit callous and just sort of maybe indifferent to public perception.
Yeah. My experience has largely been in another city, in Kansas City. And the current mayor there, I still follow him on Twitter. He's very responsive, maybe too responsive on Twitter sometimes, but he engages people. And I think, it is a way to make sure that the mayor is involved in the city to use social media that way. And I feel like a lot of what comes from the Gainey administration is really, you can tell it's from a communications team.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're doing, they try their best. And I think the fact that they have a new press secretary, Olga George, who I've known for decades, she's really good. And I think she's going to bring an injection of professionalism and timeliness that I think is much needed. I think that this is an administration that just needs to learn how to talk to the press, because the honeymoon's over. I think the honeymoon
Yeah.
between Mayor Gainey and the press and the city is over.
Well, one of the other points they really made was just kind of the consolidation of everything into
Yeah.
the mayor's office. And, I know even other cities I've covered, like in Kansas City, the mayor's press secretary was different from the city's person. Like they separated it out.
That's a good point.
Like, and then the city person would often send you to a departmental person, a spokesperson. And so, like, having people with specific knowledge does matter in how that information can get out there and get translated, and also the timeliness of it.
Yes, yes.
When you're a reporter.
You're absolutely right.
The one other thing, like, we've definitely heard some frustration about getting, quick communication responses from the mayor's office. But we've also heard that there are, like, a bunch of positions that haven't been filled.
Yeah.
And so we actually decided to look into that ourselves. Props to our host, Megan Harris, who's on vacation right now, but did a little bit of research beforehand, looked around on the city's website. And there are dozens of vacant or expired positions in the city, people who represent, important decisions made by things like the Board of Appeals, the City Planning Commission, the Gender Equity Commission, the Parking Authority. And some of these boards are more active than others, but they all kind of take on important functions of the city. Not all of these positions like rotate free at the same time. Different boards have different term tenures. And so it's the kind of thing that you just have to stay on top of, because if you don't, stuff kind of stops happening.
Yes. And when you see stories like that, it does not bode well. But you think, well, maybe the city is taking its time and finding the absolutely best qualified person, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, we're getting into, where we've already passed the 1 year mark, and we've moved into, we're now in the 1.5 year mark, I believe, or maybe even more so. And we're starting to run out of excuses. I mean, the fact is that these positions need to be filled. And you can't have the acting secretary or departmental head or blah, blah, blah doing all this. There needs to be someone who says the buck stops here.
Well, and I think, like, wanting to get the right people on these boards, and like fairness and equity too is a big thing. Like when I hate to keep on bringing up Kansas City in this conversation. That's really annoying, but that's where my experience lies.
Even though we're not in Kansas anymore.
I know. Yeah, to quote a movie. But there was the Women's Foundation there did a study of the boards and commissions in the government, and I think in the whole region, and they found like only at that time, it was about 10 years ago, only 20% of positions, I believe, were filled by women. And they launched an effort at that point to really get more women on these boards and commissions, because their point is often that's a launching point for, politics. People are on, yes, it's the tree board or, a planning and development thing, but that might be the road to a city council position or mayor later on. And, so it's important. And it's also important to have diverse voices on these boards and commissions to begin with, right?
Exactly. I believe the mayor, who's on the progressive side, of the political spectrum, and is seen as a progressive ally, is really mindful of all of these things and wants to make sure that the appointments are in accord with his political beliefs. It might just be a matter of bureaucracy. He hasn't conquered the bureaucracy yet. He was, a state representative prior to his position, and just doesn't have an office that has its arms around the mechanics
of city government.
Yeah, city government. And so there's a certain amount of that. I guess maybe a year and a half, 2 years training wheels is to be expected. But, it can't go on like this. If the perception is that he just doesn't know what he's doing, that's just going to kill him in the long run.
Yeah, and it's not great for the city either, right?
Does not inspire confidence.
Hey Pittsburgh, it's Megan. If you're craving a delicious scoop on a hot summer day, get yourself up to Bakery Square, the new local home for Jenny's ice cream in Pittsburgh. I know, it's sort of sacrilegious here to love an Ohio brand this much, but y'all, I have been a Jenny stan for years. Their flavors are so creative. The brown butter almond brittle, the brambleberry crisp, and they have dairy-free and gluten-free flavors too. Their cold brew one, it is almost better than actual coffee. And one day, I might even pluck up the courage to try the everything bagel. My friend Laura says it's divine. I'm so stoked that I can finally get my from-scratch Jenny's Fix right here in Pittsburgh, even at Target, Whole Foods, or Giant Eagle. Find all their flavors and fun facts at Jenny's, that's JENIS.com.
So everyone, earlier this week, I saw an interesting story and one that just kind of shocked me. The 22nd gun so far this year, we're at about the halfway point, was confiscated at Pittsburgh International Airport, which really puts us on pace for a record year for confiscations at the TSA checkpoint. Part of me is how is this even happening?
Can't get through with a fancy bottle of lotion, but...
Yeah, right?
Yeah, we confiscated our 22nd gun and 3,251 guns nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, so you think about all those people who are showing up at airports all across America with guns, 90% of them loaded with one bullet in the chamber. And it's like a matter of, it's just a short flight to Chicago. I mean, what's the big deal? Or, I just forgot it was in my handbag and whatever. And it's sort of it's horrific. I mean, these are people who, if they're not smart enough to realize they can't take a gun on a plane, they're not smart enough to realize that if someone leans their seat back on them on a flight and they get into a conflict, that they can't shoot the person without depressurizing the plane.
Yeah.
And, they're not smart enough to realize that they're endangering hundreds of people per flight.
The other thing is if people are being honest and they truly did forget and it was a mistake, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in what kind of a responsible gun owner you are. If you don't remember, have this gun lying around in your carry-on bag. So either way, there's a real cause for concern.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, growing up in the Midwest and having done a little bit on some gun shops in different places,
in Kansas.
Again, let me talk more about Kansas City. I'm sure they have these in Pittsburgh. I haven't looked into it. It's not where I shop regularly, but they make purses with gun compartment. So you can have it there for you in your concealed carry and it looks like a nice designer bag. I do think a lot of more people than you might think have guns in their backpack or their purse.
Well, and I wonder if we're setting kind of records for or on track to set a record for gun confiscations, is that dovetailing with a rising number of gun owners in the country? Saw all this reporting about gun purchases really going up during the pandemic as, more people are feeling paranoid. So what is kind of the larger national trend this is pointing to if more guns are showing up at TSA?
Good question.
I mean, people should really check because you're going to get a big, big fine if you do show up with a gun at TSA. It's a $3,000 fine is a starting fine. If you've done it more than once, if it's loaded, it goes up. It can go up to $15,000. And depending on the jurisdiction and whatever, you can be arrested.
I mean, that's a potential terrorist right there.
Yeah.
I'm going to be suspicious of anyone who brings a gun to an airport, and not have it checked into their regular bags. Because, if they, and I think the point was made earlier, if they are that thoughtless They do not deserve to get to their connecting flight on time. They deserve to be interrogated. There needs to be like an official statement somewhere that says, we caught this person doing this. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be arrested and booked and taken to county jail, but there needs to be a deterrent.
I mean, another thing that just makes me nervous, I feel like it's become a trend where reporters kind of see what they can sneak through security checkpoints. And I know one time my mom got a steak knife through TSA.
Oh.
She forgot she had it in her backpack from a picnic and just boarded a plane with a full-on steak knife. And so, 22 guns have been confiscated, but
no steak knife.
Are we certain that TSA has found them all? Or might one accidentally end up on the plane?
I mean, if you're caught with a gun on a plane, that's a major, major offense. You're like,
right.
That's a federal crime. You're going to jail, prison. So you're lucky kind of if you got caught at TSA, I think, by comparison.
Yeah, that would be preferable. And then we've seen all those videos of people fighting on planes because they don't get a second vodka given to them or whatever, or someone leans their chair back too much or whatever, and it'll be full out brawl.
Or someone brings a child on a plane. How dare they?
Yeah, we've been lucky as a nation so far that it hasn't escalated to shoot them up. Knock on wood.
I truly hope TSA is catching all of the guns.
I'm all for draconian measures when it comes to this. Throw the book at them. Lock them up. All right.
So, do we have any Wheaties fans in the group?
I eat the breakfast of champions.
Yeah, I eat Wheaties from time to time for social political reasons mostly.
Tell us, how does this contribute to our socio-political landscape?
Growing up, appearing on a box of Wheaties really said something about the values of America, the values of people, especially when we were coming out of really difficult times in terms of racial equality, social equality, and so forth. I think it was 1952 that Wheaties, the breakfast of champions, began putting Black people on the boxes of Wheaties, which was a real big statement because, you would have, little white kids across America eating the breakfast cereal of champions. And seeing, a Black baseball player.
Yeah, it was the Dodgers catcher, Roy Campanella, was the first Black athlete on the box.
Yeah. And retroactively, Jesse Owens, because that in its own way signaled a social acceptance that was not easy for other institutions in America to do, but it paved the way. It's like, but they're safe enough for a box of cereal. What else are they safe for, et cetera, to the point where today it's almost ubiquitous in terms of champions.
Yeah, I bring up Wheaties because if you pick up a box now, you're going to see a familiar face on there, a Steeler TJ Watt.
Yeah, you're going to see Steelers linebacker TJ Watts and his brother, a defensive end JJ Watt with Houston, and so they're splitting a cover. And it's like, I don't think I've seen much of that before. I think there was U.S. Olympic team once was on.
Yeah.
And maybe women's soccer team, Olympic soccer team.
Yeah, they've put some teams on, but...
This is the first family affair, the first time brothers are sharing the box together.
Right. And that's fairly significant. And they should both be very proud of that honor. And I like that. I like the fact that the tradition continues. That Wheaties is making statements about American values and so forth. That it isn't just the glory hogs that get it. It's not just people who win their 100th gold medal in the Olympics. It's people who just really represent good fundamental sports values.
Yeah, for anyone who's like not super familiar with the Watt brothers, and especially with TJ because he's our local guy, what do you think landed them this cover?
They were a New York Times clue fairly recently, crossword clue, so maybe that helped.
That's step one.
Exactly. So I was like, who are these Watt brothers? I looked them up, and they're both really impressive athletes. JJ, who's the older brother, he's won the AP Defensive Player of the Year 3 times in Houston.
Ooh.
And TJ, who's younger, so he's got some catching up to do. He's won it once for the Steelers, and they're both heavily involved in charitable causes. They work to help people after Hurricane Harvey. And our boy TJ, he's involved with all the hospitals here in town, and he regularly visits patients. He also uses money from merchandise sales to donate to kids who need professional care that their parents can't afford. So that seems really sweet and just like a nice thing to do.
Yeah, that is really nice.
Let's not forget the Athletics. They're generational Hall of Fame caliber players, but they do seem to have hearts of gold and, have good family values. And to me, it definitely seems like they're worthy of being on a Wheaties box.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
I ended up doing a little deep dive on Wheaties history.
Ooh.
Just because I was curious like how this even became a thing. Did you know that apparently Wheaties actually came to be by accident? There was this clinician who spilled bran gruel onto a hot stove and it turned into these flakes.
I'd weirdly listened to a whole podcast about the cereal industry.
Wow.
So I had heard that.
Some niche interests here.
Like, they make a podcast episode about everything nowadays. You learn a little bit.
Yeah. So created by mistake. And then the part that I loved the most was, I guess, like sales weren't that great. It was maybe going to get pulled off the shelves. And then Wheaties created what people believe is the very first radio jingle.
Wow.
In 1926. And I actually they commissioned a barbershop style quartet to sing about it. And I actually pulled it up if you all want to hear.
I do want to hear it.
Sure. Yeah.
Have you tried Wheaties? They're whole wheat with all of the bran. Won't you try Wheaties? For wheat is the best food of man. They're crispy and crunchy the whole year through. The kiddies never tire of them, and neither will you. So just buy Wheaties, the best breakfast food in the land.
There you go. Let's see ChatGPT steal something like that.
Can't be done.
Wow, Wheaties. I like that Wheaties was an innovator, the radio jingle.
So who would you, if you were on the, Wheaties commission, what Pittsburgh athlete would you like to see on the cover next?
Pittsburgh athlete. Oh, wow. I'll tell you what. I would put any member of the Pirates on a Wheaties box if we could even get to the finals.
Like, are you talking World Series or just the playoffs?
I'm just talking about the playoffs.
Okay. Like the wild card game?
Set a realistic goal.
Like wild card game even. Wild card game. Like, okay.
Anyone who could make us a contender. But who I don't know who. I can't think of. No one comes to mind. No one with that kind of charisma and so forth. I mean, maybe past players, people, who are dead or something. I can think of plenty of people, but they've already been on the Wheaties boxes.
Yeah.
And so, I can't think of anyone current that I really, really love.
Was Roberto Clemente on a Wheaties box?
Oh, good question. I would assume so, especially after his death.
Oh, yeah. Here we go. You can buy it on eBay for $119.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank God.
If he wasn't, I was going to say we start the campaign right here, right now.
And he was also on a commemorative cornflakes box.
Oh.
That's more affordable on eBay if anyone's interested.
Okay. I don't know what the, cereal equivalent of EGOTing is, but he's on his way.
Maybe, yeah, it says you got, I got.
I got.
Crunch, crunch.
Sorry.
There you go.
Tony Norman is a columnist at Next Pittsburgh. Tony, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for waking me up.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. The team this week includes Megan Harris, Maria Carter, and A.K. Almuman. Francesca DeBecco, Natalia Aldana, and Adrian Gonzalez wrote and edited the newsletter. Our music is by Ben G. I'm lead producer Mallory Falk. We'll be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend.
I mean, usually it's Olympic champions and sports champions and that. You don't see a whole
And
lot.
podcast champions.
Well, I think we have to wait. A little bit on that, Maria.
Oh, okay. Someday, Tony,
Your
you and
day is
me.
coming.
Okay.